Gavin Arnold came home to silence. No crying, no laughter, nothing. He called for Rose, called for his twins. His voice echoed back empty. He searched every room, heart pounding, hands shaking. Then he opened the nursery door. His maid, bound to the headboard, gagged. His babies, 8 months old, wrapped in rope, on the bed. No break-in, no ransom note, no answers. Just a woman with rope, burns on her wrists, and a secret in her eyes. What happened in that house will change everything you think you know, about truth, about judgment, about who really pays the price when the powerful make enemies. The jet touched down in Austin just after 3. Gavin stepped off with his phone glowing. Emails, contracts, numbers. $2 billion, secured in Seattle. His lawyer was already celebrating. Gavin wasn't thinking about his twins. Hadn't thought about them in 3 days. 8 months old. Too young to remember. That's what he told himself. His driver merged onto the highway. The Texas hill country spread out green and golden. Lake Travis glittered in the distance. Beautiful land, quiet land, the kind of place where nothing bad happens. The mansion sat on the hillside, overlooking the water. 5 bedrooms, big windows, a boat at the dock that nobody used. When they pulled up, Rose's Honda was in the driveway, but the house was dark. Every window, every room. Gavin checked his watch. 4 o'clock, Tuesday afternoon. The twins should be up from their nap by now. Rose should have music playing. She always played that soft lullaby station, said it kept them calm. He stepped through the front door. Rose? His voice hit the walls and died. He walked into the kitchen, clean, too clean. A baby bottle sat on the counter, formula dried around the rim like it had been sitting there for hours. His chest tightened. Cody, Caden. Nothing. He moved faster now. Living room, empty. Office, empty. Guest room, empty. He took the stairs 2 at a time. His boots hit the wood hard. Rose. The hallway stretched out long and quiet. The nursery door was closed. His hand reached for the handle. His fingers were shaking. He pushed it open. And what he saw on the other side would haunt him for the rest of his life. Before we continue, hit subscribe and like this video. And I want you to think about something. God places people in our lives for a reason. Sometimes they're not the ones we expect. Sometimes they're quiet. Sometimes they're the ones we barely notice. But when trouble comes, they're the ones who stay. So ask yourself, who has God placed in your life that you've been too busy to see? Let's continue. Rose was tied to the headboard. Her arms stretched up above her head. Thick rope wrapped around her wrists and knotted to the wooden frame. Silver tape covered her mouth. Her blue work uniform was wrinkled and twisted. Yellow cleaning gloves still on her hands. She'd been cleaning when they took her. Her eyes were shut, but she wasn't sleeping. Gavin could see the tension in her face, the way her jaw clenched under that tape. She'd been awake this whole time, waiting, listening for footsteps, praying for help. On the bed beside her lay his sons. Cody on the left, Caden on the right, 8 months old, tiny bodies wrapped in the same thick rope, not tight enough to hurt them, just tight enough to keep them from rolling off the bed. Their little chests moved up and down, steady, calm. They were asleep. Red onesies, clean, pacifiers resting next to their heads on the blue blanket. Someone had been careful with them. That thought made Gavin's stomach turn. His phone hit the floor, screen cracked. He didn't notice. He moved without thinking, dropped to his knees beside the bed. His fingers found the edge of the tape on Rose's mouth. He pulled it off fast. She sucked in air like she'd been underwater, coughed hard. Her voice came out scratchy and weak. "They're okay, Mr. Arnold. They're okay." Those were her first words. Not help me, not untie me, not what took you so long. They're okay. I sang to them, she said, voice cracking. They were crying so hard, so scared. I couldn't hold them, couldn't reach them. So I sang, every song I knew, over and over, until they stopped crying, until they fell asleep. I promised them their daddy was coming, and you came. Gavin's throat closed up. He fumbled for his pocket knife. His hands were shaking bad. He sawed at the rope around her right wrist. The blade slipped, cut into his own thumb. Blood smeared across the white rope. He kept cutting. The rope fell away, then the other wrist. Rose brought her arms down slow, wincing. Her wrists were torn up, raw red lines where she'd twisted and pulled against the rope, dried blood crusted at the edges. But she didn't look at her wounds, didn't rub her wrists, didn't cry out. She reached for Caden first, pressed the back of her hand to his forehead, then his cheek, checking for fever, then Cody, same thing. Her fingers touched their faces so gentle, so careful, like they were made of glass. She counted their breaths, 1, 2, 3, still protecting them, even now. Gavin watched her. This woman he'd hired 3 months ago. This woman he barely knew. She'd spent hours tied to that bed, wrists bleeding, mouth taped shut. And her only thought was his children. Rose, his voice came out rough. Who did this? Who was here? She stopped. Her hand rested on Cody's chest, feeling his heartbeat. Then she looked up at Gavin, and something in her eyes made him go cold. It wasn't fear, it wasn't shock, it was something else, something heavy, like she'd been carrying a secret for hours, and it was crushing her. They knew you wouldn't be home, she whispered. They knew exactly when you'd be back. They knew your schedule, Mr. Arnold. They knew everything. Outside, the sun was setting over Lake Travis, orange and gold spreading across the water like fire. Inside that nursery, Gavin Arnold knelt on the floor beside his sleeping babies, and for the first time in his life, he realized his money couldn't protect the people he loved. Someone had walked into his home, tied up his children, bound his maid, and vanished like smoke. And Rose knew something she wasn't saying yet. Gavin's mind raced. They knew his schedule. They knew he wouldn't be home. They knew everything. How? He pulled out his phone. The screen was cracked from the fall, but still working. His fingers moved on instinct, dialing 911. There's been a break-in, he said. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. Hollow. My children. My employee. They were tied up. Please send someone. The operator asked questions. Address, names, injuries. Gavin answered, but his eyes stayed on Rose. She hadn't moved from the bed, still sitting there with her torn-up wrists, watching over the twins like a mother hen. Her fingers rested light on Cody's back, feeling him breathe. The operator said help was on the way. 12 minutes. Gavin hung up. 12 minutes felt like 12 years. He moved closer to the bed, sat on the edge. His boys slept on, peaceful and unaware. Whatever nightmare had unfolded in this room, Rose had shielded them from it. Tell me what happened, Gavin said quietly. From the beginning. Rose swallowed hard. Her throat must have been dry, hours with that tape on her mouth. I was cleaning the bathroom down the hall, she started. Her voice still rough. The twins were napping. I heard the back door open, the one by the lake. I thought maybe you came home early. She paused, took a breath. Then I heard footsteps, more than one person, and they weren't calling out, weren't announcing themselves, just moving through the house, quiet, like they belonged here. Gavin's jaw tightened. I came out of the bathroom, Rose continued. 2 men, maybe 3, I couldn't tell. They wore masks, black masks, gloves on their hands. Professional. They moved like they'd done this before. Her voice shook now, just a little, but she kept going. I tried to scream. One of them grabbed me, put his hand over my mouth. The other one went straight for the nursery, knew exactly where it was, didn't search, didn't guess. Just walked right to your babies like he had a map. Gavin felt sick. They brought me in here, Rose said, made me sit against this headboard, tied me up, taped my mouth. The whole time, they were calm, polite even, called me Miss Harris, like we were having a conversation over coffee. She looked down at the sleeping twins. Then they wrapped the boys in rope, gentle, careful, not hurting them, just containing them. And the whole time, they kept saying things. What things? Gavin's voice came out tight. Rose's eyes met his again, that heaviness still there. They said this was a message. They said you'd know what it meant. They said next time, the rope wouldn't be so loose. Next time. Those 2 words hung in the air like smoke. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. But Gavin barely heard them. His mind was stuck on one question. What had he done to bring this evil into his home? The sirens grew louder, then stopped. Doors slammed outside, footsteps on the porch, heavy boots. Gavin went downstairs to let them in. 3 officers from the Travis County Sheriff's Department, 2 men, 1 woman, all of them with serious faces. They moved through the house with purpose, checking rooms, checking windows, checking doors. No forced entry, one of them said, shaking his head. Everything's locked up tight. Gavin led them upstairs to the nursery. The twins were still asleep. Rose still sat on the bed beside them. She'd moved to the edge now, but she hadn't left, wouldn't leave them. The officers took in the scene, the rope on the floor, the tape, Rose's wrists, the sleeping babies. One of them, the older man, pulled out a notepad. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to ask you some questions." Rose nodded. "Yes, sir." "How long have you worked for, Mr. Arnold?" 3 months. "And before that?" "The Morrison family, over in Westlake." The officer wrote it down. His partner was taking pictures. The flash lit up the room again and again. "Did you let anyone into the house today?" Rose's jaw tightened. "Just a little." "No, sir, I did not." "The back door by the lake, was it locked?" "Yes, sir. I checked it this morning, like I always do." The officer looked at her, really looked at her. His eyes moved over her torn wrists, her wrinkled uniform, her face. "And you didn't recognize any of the intruders?" "They wore masks." "But their voices, their build, anything familiar?" Rose shook her head. "No, sir." The questions kept coming, same tone, polite, professional, but something underneath it made Gavin's skin prickle. They weren't asking Rose like she was a victim. They were asking her like she was a suspect. "The children seem calm," the female officer said. She stood near the bed, looking down at Cody and Caden, remarkably calm for what they went through. Rose looked up at her. "I kept them calm. That's what I was hired to do." "For hours, while you were tied up?" "I sang to them. I talked to them. I told them everything was going to be okay." The officer nodded slowly, but her eyes held doubt. Gavin stepped forward. "She protected my children. She kept them safe." The officers looked at him, then back at Rose. "We'll need to check the security system," the older one said, "and we'll need Miss Harris to come down to the station, just for a formal statement." Rose's face didn't change, but Gavin saw her hands, the way her fingers curled into her palms, tight, scared. She knew what was happening. And so did he. The story was already being written. And Rose was becoming the villain in it. The officers left after 2 hours, took their photos, took their notes, took Rose's statement. But they didn't take any suspects with them. Gavin stood in the kitchen, phone in his hand. The screen glowed with notifications, texts from his assistant, his lawyer, his business partners. And then he saw it. A news alert. "Questions swirl around Lake Travis estate incident. Household employee under investigation." His stomach dropped. He clicked on the article. Anonymous sources, speculation, words like suspicious circumstances and no signs of forced entry, and employee's background being examined. They hadn't even released an official statement yet, and already the story was out there. Already it was twisting into something ugly. Rose sat at the kitchen table, still in her uniform, still wearing those yellow gloves. She hadn't changed, hadn't eaten. Just sat there with her hands wrapped around a coffee mug she hadn't touched. Outside the window, headlights swept across the driveway. A news van, KVUE, parking at the edge of the property. Then another one. Rose saw them too. Her face didn't change, but something in her eyes went dim, like a candle flickering out. She knew. Gavin's phone rang. His PR director. He ignored it. It rang again. His lawyer this time. He let it go to voicemail. The house felt smaller now, walls pressing in. The twins were upstairs with the pediatrician Gavin had called, getting checked over, making sure they were okay. They were fine, thanks to Rose. But no one was going to write that story. Gavin pulled out a chair and sat across from her. The table felt like a canyon between them. "I didn't do this," Rose said, her voice quiet, steady, but tired, so tired. Gavin opened his mouth to respond. "I know you're wondering if I did," she continued. She didn't look at him, just stared at that coffee mug. "Everyone will be. I'm the stranger here, the new one, the one without a name that means something in this town." "Rose, I don't. You don't have to say it." She finally looked up. Her eyes were dry, but something burned behind them. "I've seen this before, Mr. Arnold. Different house, different family, same story. The help is always the first one they blame." Gavin's chest ached. She was right. He could feel it happening already, the way the officers had looked at her, the way the article was written, the way people would read it and nod and say, "Of course, had to be her." Outside, another news van pulled up. More headlights, more cameras, more people hungry for a story they'd already decided on. Rose watched them through the window, and for the first time since he'd found her, Gavin saw fear on her face. Not fear of the men who'd tied her up. Fear of what came next. The news vans stayed parked outside, their lights glowing in the dark like eyes watching the house. The twins were asleep upstairs. The pediatrician had left, said they were fine, healthy, no trauma, just two babies who'd slept through the worst afternoon of their lives. Because Rose had made sure of it. Gavin poured himself a glass of water. His hands still weren't steady. He drank it down, set the glass on the counter. Rose hadn't moved from the table. He walked back over, sat down across from her again. "Tell me everything," he said. "From the beginning, every detail you remember." Rose took a breath, let it out slow. "They came through the back door, by the lake. 2 men, maybe 3. I couldn't be sure. They moved fast, quiet, professional." She paused. "They knew the twins' names, called them Cody and Caden like they'd practiced it. Knew my name too. Called me Miss Harris, real polite, like we were old friends." Gavin's jaw tightened. "They said they were sending you a message, that this was just the beginning if you didn't back off, that next time the rope wouldn't be so loose." "Back off from what?" Rose shook her head. "They didn't say exactly." She went quiet, looked down at her hands, those rope burns still angry and red. "But there's something else," she said softly. Gavin leaned forward. "One of them, the tall one. Before they left, he laughed, and he said something I'll never forget." She looked up at Gavin, her eyes steady, serious. He said, "Tell Arnold that Whitmore sends his regards. Tell him Texas ain't big enough for both of them anymore." The blood drained from Gavin's face. Whitmore. Marcus Whitmore. His old partner. The man he'd forced out of their company 3 years ago. The man who'd stood on the courthouse steps and swore he'd take everything Gavin loved, piece by piece. Everyone thought it was just talk, bitter words from a bitter man. But it wasn't talk. It was a promise. Rose watched him, saw the recognition on his face. "You know who that is?" she said. Not a question. Gavin couldn't speak. His throat was too tight. Rose stood up slowly, pushed her chair back, walked to the sink, looked out the window at those news vans. "There's one more thing," she said quietly. Gavin waited. "After they left, I sat there tied up for a long time, hours, and I thought about what would happen when you came home, when the police came." She turned to face him. "And I knew. I knew that if you found me untied, walking around your house with your white babies, no one would believe I was innocent. So I tied myself back to that headboard, put my hands back in those ropes, on purpose." Gavin stared at her. "I chose those ropes, Mr. Arnold, because freedom would have made me look guilty." The weight of those words pressed down on the room like a stone. Gavin was on the phone before sunrise. "Travis County Sheriff's Department." He asked for the detective handling his case. Got transferred twice. Finally got through. "Marcus Whitmore," Gavin said. "He's behind this. He threatened me 3 years ago, said he'd take everything I loved." Silence on the other end. Then the detective spoke. Careful, measured. "Mr. Arnold, that's a serious accusation. Marcus Whitmore is a respected businessman in Austin. You're telling me he orchestrated a home invasion based on what your maid says she heard?" "Your maid." The way he said it made Gavin's stomach turn. "She's not lying," Gavin said. "I'm not saying she is, but we need evidence, real evidence, not hearsay." The call ended with promises. We'll look into it. We'll check his alibi. We'll be in touch. Empty words. Gavin set his phone down, rubbed his face with both hands. Rose was in the living room, sitting on the couch, still in yesterday's clothes. She'd been up all night too. Every hour, she'd gone upstairs to check on the twins, touch their foreheads, count their breaths. Now she sat there staring at nothing. Gavin's phone buzzed. His business partner. Third time this morning. He answered. Gavin, we need to talk about this situation. The investors are nervous. The press is circling. This thing with your maid. Her name is Rose. Pause. Fine, Rose. Look, I'm not saying she did anything, but the optics here are bad. Really bad. You need to distance yourself. Let the police handle it. Issue a statement saying she's been let go, pending investigation. She didn't do anything wrong. That's not the point. The point is what people think. And right now, people think your black maid tied up your white babies. Whether it's true or not doesn't matter. Perception is reality, Gavin. You know that. Gavin hung up. His hands were shaking, not from fear this time, from anger. He walked into the living room. Rose looked up at him. You should let me go, she said quietly. What? Fire me. Tell the press I've been dismissed. It'll make this easier for you. Rose? I'm serious, Mr. Arnold. She stood up. Her voice steady but her eyes wet. I've been here 3 months. You've got an empire, a reputation, 2 babies who need their father's name to mean something in this world. She picked up her bag from the floor. She'd already packed it. I can disappear, find another job, another city. You can go back to your life. Tell them I quit. Tell them whatever you want. She walked toward the door, and something in Gavin broke. Not his trust, not his belief. His silence. Rose, stop. She paused, hand on the doorknob. Don't go. Rose stood at the door, her bag in her hand, her fingers on the knob. Don't go, Gavin said again. She didn't move, didn't turn around. Why? Her voice was barely a whisper. Why should I stay? So you can feel good about yourself? So you can tell people you gave me a chance? No. Then why? Gavin took a step closer, his throat tight, his heart pounding. Because you're innocent, and I'm not going to let them destroy you for something you didn't do. Rose finally turned, her eyes searching his face, looking for the lie, the hesitation, the doubt. She didn't find it. You don't know what you're saying, she said. If you defend me, they'll come for you too, your business, your reputation, everything you built. I know. And you're willing to lose all that? For your maid? The word hung in the air. Maid. Like that's all she was, all she'd ever be. Gavin shook his head slowly. You're not just my maid, Rose. You're the woman who sang to my babies for hours while your wrists bled. You're the person who tied herself back up so people would believe her. You're the one who stayed when anyone else would have run. His voice cracked. My children are alive and safe because of you, and I'll be damned if I let this world make you pay for that. Rose's bag slipped from her fingers, hit the floor with a soft thud. Tears rolled down her cheeks, silent. She didn't wipe them away. Gavin pulled out his phone, called his PR director. Set up a press conference. Tomorrow morning, Travis County Courthouse steps. Panic on the other end. Gavin, what are you going to say? The truth. He hung up. Rose stared at him. You're really doing this? Yes. They'll tear you apart. Maybe. Your partners will leave. Some of them. Your name will be in every headline. Good. Then people will have to listen. Rose sank onto the couch, her hands trembling now. I don't understand, she whispered. Nobody's ever stood up for me like this, not once in my whole life. Gavin sat beside her, not too close, but close enough. Then it's about time someone did. Outside, the news vans still waited, their lights glowing in the dark. But inside that house, something shifted, something cracked open. A man who'd spent his life chasing money finally saw what mattered, and a woman who'd spent her life being overlooked finally felt seen. Tomorrow, he would stand on those courthouse steps. Tomorrow, he would speak the truth. And whatever came after that, they would face it together. The morning sun beat down on the Travis County Courthouse steps. Gavin stood behind a podium, microphones pointed at his face like weapons, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions before he'd even opened his mouth. Rose stood in the back of the crowd, arms crossed, heart pounding. Gavin raised his hand. The crowd went quiet. 3 days ago, someone broke into my home, he began, his voice steady, clear. They tied up my 8-month-old twins. They bound and gagged my employee, Rose Harris, and they left a message for me. He paused. Let the words sink in. Since then, I've watched the media turn Rose into a suspect. I've watched people who don't know her decide she's guilty. I've watched a woman who spent hours singing to my children while her wrists bled become the villain in a story she didn't write. His jaw tightened. That ends today. He told them everything. Marcus Whitmore's name, the threats from 3 years ago, the investigation that was finally moving in the right direction. His own assistant, Derek, who'd been feeding information to Whitmore for months, the security codes, the schedules, the betrayal from inside his own circle. Then he said the part that made everyone go silent. Rose Harris tied herself back to that headboard after the intruders left. She put her own hands back in those ropes because she knew that if she was found free, no one would believe her innocence. Think about that. A woman had to chain herself to prove she wasn't guilty. His voice cracked. That's not her failure. That's ours. The cameras kept flashing, but the tone had shifted. The questions changed. By evening, the story had flipped. Headlines read different now. Billionaire defends Maid, points finger at former partner, the woman who tied herself up to prove her innocence. 2 weeks later, Marcus Whitmore was arrested. Conspiracy, extortion, endangering children. Derek cooperated with prosecutors, told them everything. Rose was cleared. Officially, publicly. The sheriff's department issued an apology. The same reporters who dragged her name through the mud now called her a hero. But Rose didn't feel like a hero. She sat in Gavin's kitchen, the same spot where she'd almost walked out that door, the same table where she'd wrapped her hands around a coffee mug she never drank. Gavin sat across from her. I want you to stay, he said. Not as my maid, as the twins' caregiver, with your own cottage on the property, full benefits, and I'll pay for nursing school, whatever you need. Rose looked at him, searching his face again. This isn't charity, he said quietly. This is me finally seeing what you're worth. She was quiet for a long time. Then she nodded. Okay, but we do this as equals, not boss and employee, partners. Gavin smiled. First real smile in weeks. Partners. Outside, Lake Travis sparkled in the fading light, and inside that kitchen, 2 people who'd been strangers 3 months ago shook hands on something that felt like family. 6 months passed. The autumn sun set over Lake Travis, painting the water in shades of orange and gold. Rose pushed the twins in their stroller along the shoreline path. Cody and Caden babbled happily, pointing at birds, grabbing at leaves that drifted past. They were walking now, taking their first wobbly steps, saying their first words, and their favorite word was row row. Rose smiled every time she heard it, every single time. She'd enrolled in nursing school at Austin Community College, morning classes, then home to the twins. The cottage Gavin gave her sat at the edge of the property, small, cozy, hers. Her wrists had healed, the rope burns faded to thin white lines, but she didn't hide them. They were part of her story now. Footsteps behind her. She turned. Gavin walked up the path. No suit today, jeans, t-shirt, sneakers. He looked different, lighter, like he'd set down something heavy he'd been carrying for years. Mind if I join you? He asked. Rose smiled. It's your property. It's your home. He fell into step beside her. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, just the sound of the water lapping at the shore and the twins making their baby sounds. I found something, Rose said after a while. She stopped walking, reached into the basket under the stroller, pulled out a coil of rope, white, thick, the same rope that had bound her wrists that day. Gavin's face went pale. Where did you get that? Storage room. You kept it. Evidence, I guess. He nodded slowly. Rose walked to the edge of the dock, stood there looking out at the water. Gavin followed. The twins watched from their stroller, quiet for once. Rose held the rope in both hands, felt its weight. "Some bonds you choose," she said softly. "Some bonds choose you, but nobody gets to tie me down again." She pulled her arm back and threw it. The rope sailed through the air, hit the water with a splash, sank slowly, disappearing into the dark blue. Gone. Rose let out a breath she'd been holding for 6 months. Gavin stood beside her, silent, respectful. "Thank you," she said finally. "For what?" "For seeing me, when nobody else did." He shook his head. "You saved my children, Rose. I should be thanking you for the rest of my life." She turned to face him. "Then, let's call it even." They walked back to the stroller together. Cody reached up his little arms. Rose picked him up. Gavin picked up Caden. 2 people who'd started as strangers, boss and maid. 2 different worlds that were never supposed to touch. Now they were family. Not by blood, not by law, but by something stronger. By fire, by truth, by choice. The sun dipped below the hills. The sky turned purple and pink. And on the shores of Lake Travis, in the heart of Texas hill country, 4 people walked home together. The rope was gone, but the bond remained.